The year is 1967. America stands at a crossroads, torn between the promise of peace and the thunder of war, between the old guard and a rising generation that refuses to be silent. In Los Angeles, beneath the haze of smog and neon, 4 men gather in a cramped recording studio on Sunset Boulevard. They are not yet legends. They are barely known beyond the Whisky a Go-Go, that dark cavern on the Strip where college students and runaways dance until dawn. But within months, their voices will echo. Across every transistor radio in the nation, their sound will crack open the airwaves like lightning splitting an August sky, and their name, The Doors, will become synonymous with a cultural earthquake that no one saw coming. January arrives cold and uncertain. The studio is called Sunset Sound, a modest 4-track facility that smells of cigarette ash and magnetic tape. Producer Paul Rothschild paces the control room, headphones slung around his neck, watching through the glass as Jim Morrison stands before the microphone. Morrison's leather pants catch the dim studio light. His hair falls in dark waves past his shoulders. He closes his eyes. The band begins to play. Ray Manzarek's fingers dance across the Vox Continental organ, conjuring a melody that sounds like sunlight filtered through stained glass. Robby Krieger's guitar slides in, a flamenco-tinged riff that speaks of desert heat and forbiddens desire. John Densmore's drums hold the center, steady and hypnotic. And then Morrison's voice emerges, low and urgent, weaving a spell that seems to pull the very air from the room. They are recording their first album. The sessions stretch late into the night, fueled by coffee and creative hunger. Morrison insists on performing live vocals, rejecting the safety of overdubs. He wants to capture something raw, something true. Rothschild understands. He has worked with jazz musicians, with folk poets, but he has never encountered anyone quite like this. Morrison does not. Simply Sing Ye inhabits the songs, becomes them, transforms the studio into a stage where ancient myths collide with modern anxieties. When they record a certain track a song Krieger wrote about desire and transformation, the tape seems to catch fire in the machine. The organ swirls, the guitar burns. Morrison's voice rises and falls like a preacher at midnight, calling the faithful and the faithless alike to witness something they cannot name but desperately need. Before we begin this journey, be part of our channel. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any incredible story we've prepared for you. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. February brings the album's release. The cover is stark, 4 faces emerging from shadow, Morrison's gaze direct and unflinching. The title, simply The Doors. Critics who notice it at all offer measured praise. The music press acknowledges the band's potential but remains cautious. Folk rock still dominates the charts. The Beatles have released SGT, Peppers. Jefferson Airplane soars in San Francisco. But there is something about The Doors that does not fit neatly into categories. They are too dark for the flower children, too literary for the garage bands, too dangerous for AM radio programmers who prefer their rebellions sanitized and safe. Yet the album begins to move. Record stores in Los Angeles report steady sales. College radio stations add tracks to their playlists. And then, in early spring, a radio programmer at a station in the Midwest makes a decision that will alter the trajectory of American popular music. He takes the album's opening track, the one Krieger wrote, the one with Morrison's voice coiling through 7 minutes of psychedelic fire, and he does something audacious. He plays it, all 7 minutes. During afternoon drive time, the phone lines explode. Listeners call in, demanding to know what they just heard. Some are outraged, some are confused. Many want to hear it again. The programmer, sensing something extraordinary, plays it twice more that evening. Word spreads. Other stations begin to take notice. But there is a problem. 7 minutes is an eternity in the world of top 40 radio, where songs must fit between commercials, where attention spans are measured in seconds, where the format demands brevity and repetition. Elektra Records, the label that signed The Doors, faces a dilemma. The song has undeniable power, but radio will not play it in its full form. Label executives approach the band with a proposal. Create a shortened version. Cut it down to 3 minutes. Make it palatable for the masses. The band resists, Morrison especially. He views the song as a complete work, a journey that cannot be abbreviated without losing its essence. But the label persists, and eventually a compromise is reached. An edited version is created, trimmed and tightened, the instrumental passages reduced, the architecture compressed. It is, in Morrison's view, a necessary betrayal, a sacrifice made to reach the world. The single is released in late April. The edited version runs just over 3 minutes. Radio stations across the country add it to rotation. And then something remarkable happens. The song begins to climb the charts. Not slowly, not tentatively, but with a momentum that seems almost supernatural. By May, it has entered the top 40. By June, it is in the top 10. Disc jockeys struggle to pronounce the band's name. Teenagers memorize every word. Parents listen with suspicion and concern. The lyrics speak of fire and desire, of urgency and transcendence, in language that feels both ancient and utterly contemporary. Morrison himself remains ambivalent about the song's success. In interviews, he speaks of it with a detachment that borders on disdain. He did not write it. He did not conceive its central metaphor. He is merely the vessel, the voice that carries Krieger's words into the world. But the public does not care about such distinctions. To them, Morrison is the Doors. His face appears on magazine covers. His image lean, intense, beautiful, in a way that unsettles as much as it attracts, becomes the symbol of a generation's restlessness. The band's touring schedule intensifies. They play the Fillmore in San Francisco, sharing bills with the Grateful Dead and Big Brother and the Holding Company. They perform at the Avalon Ballroom, where the light shows transform their music into a multimedia experience. Morrison's silhouette projected 10 feet tall against walls covered in swirling psychedelic patterns. They travel to the East Coast, conquering venues in New York and Boston. Everywhere they go, the same song blazes from car radios, jukebox speakers, transistor radios, carried by kids on beaches and street corners. By July, the inevitable happens. The single reaches #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sits atop the charts for 3 weeks, a reign that feels both triumphant and surreal. The Doors are now, undeniably, one of the biggest bands in America. The album itself climbs to #2. Morrison's face stares out from record store windows across the nation. Ray Manzarek, interviewed years later, would recall this period as both exhilarating and disorienting, the sensation of being swept up in a wave they could not control, riding a force that seemed to have its own will, its own destiny. But success brings complications. The band is invited to perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, the ultimate validation of mainstream acceptance. It is September now, and the nation's most watched television program offers the Doors a chance to reach an audience of millions. There is, however, a condition. The show's producers, nervous about the song's lyrics, request that Morrison change a specific word during the performance. They worry about the implications, about the parents watching at home, about the fragile sensibilities of a nation already divided by war and generational conflict. Morrison agrees to the change. The band rehearses with the alteration in place. But when the cameras go live, when the red light blinks on and Morrison steps to the microphone before an audience of 50 million Americans, something shifts. Perhaps it is instinct, perhaps it is rebellion. Perhaps it is simply that Morrison cannot, even for the sake of career advancement, betray the song's integrity. He sings the original lyric, exactly as written. The producers erupt in fury. The band is informed they will never be invited back. Morrison shrugs. He has said what needed to be said. The autumn brings more touring, more performances, more nights in anonymous hotel rooms and backstage corridors. The album continues to sell. Other tracks begin to receive airplay. Songs about fathers and sons, about wandering souls and broken hearts, about ancient myths reimagined for the modern age. Morrison's lyrics reveal a mind steeped in poetry and philosophy, in Blake and Rimbaud, in Nietzsche and the theater of cruelty. He is not simply a rock singer. He is something stranger, something more dangerous, a shaman in leather, a poet with a microphone, a beautiful disaster unfolding in real time. The year that began in obscurity ends in chaos and glory. By December, the Doors have sold over 1 million records. They have performed on stages from Los Angeles to London. They have been praised and condemned, celebrated and censored. They have become, whether they intended it or not, the voice of a generation that questions everything authority, tradition, the very notion of limits. And through it all, that one song continues to burn. It plays at parties and protests, at weddings and funerals, in moments of joy and moments of rage. It becomes a soundtrack for the summer of love and the winter of discontent. It is adopted by soldiers in Vietnam, who scrawl its title on their helmets and blast it from makeshift speakers in jungle camps. It is embraced by activists who hear in its urgent rhythms a call to action. It is danced to by teenagers who understand nothing of its literary origins, but feel, in their bones, its primal power. Morrison, watching all this from behind dark sunglasses and a haze of alcohol, seems both amused and appalled. He never wanted to be a pop star. He wanted to be a poet, a filmmaker, an artist working in multiple mediums. But fate or circumstance, or some combination of talent and timing, has placed him at the center of a cultural moment he cannot escape. The song that lifted him to fame becomes a prison of expectations. Audiences demand it at every concert. Radio stations play it hourly. He is forever associated with words he did not write, a melody he did not compose. Yet there is a strange alchemy at work. Morrison's voice, with its shamanistic intensity and theatrical vulnerability, transforms the song into something greater than the sum of its parts. Without him, it might have been merely another garage rock tune, a competent blend of organ and guitar. With him, it becomes a ritual, an incantation, a doorway, if you will, into altered states of consciousness. His performance on the original recording captures something that cannot be replicated. The sound of a young man standing at the threshold of fame and oblivion, singing as if his life depends on it, because perhaps it does. The cultural impact ripples outward in ways no one could have predicted. The song's success opens doors for other bands who refuse to conform to radio's arbitrary time limits. Progressive rock begins to emerge. FM radio gains legitimacy as an alternative to top 40 constraints. The notion that popular music can be both commercially successful and artistically ambitious takes hold. The Doors, almost accidentally, become pioneers of a new paradigm. But there is a cost. Morrison's drinking intensifies. The pressure of constant touring, of living up to an image he never fully embraced, begins to erode his spirit. In interviews from late 1967, his answers grow shorter, more cryptic. He speaks of wanting to disappear, of shedding the persona of rock star and returning to something more authentic. He talks about death with a casualness that disturbs those around him. Friends notice a darkness creeping into his eyes, a weariness that seems premature for a man not yet 24 years old. The band members themselves struggle to adapt. Manzarek, the oldest and most grounded, tries to maintain focus. on the music. Krieger, soft-spoken and cerebral, retreats into composition. Densmore, the jazz-trained perfectionist, grows frustrated with Morrison's increasing unreliability. They are four individuals thrust into a spotlight designed for one, and the strain begins to show. Yet when they play together, something magical still happens. The chemistry that first ignited in that Sunset Boulevard studio remains potent, capable of conjuring transcendence even amid the chaos. The year 1967 also marks a broader cultural transformation. The summer of love blooms in San Francisco, but its promises of peace and unity quickly wilt under the harsh realities of political violence and social upheaval. The Vietnam War escalates. Race riots tear through American cities. The generation gap widens into a chasm. And through it all, the Doors' music provides a soundtrack that acknowledges the darkness as much as the light. Unlike the utopian anthems of the San Francisco scene, their songs embrace shadows, contradictions, the full spectrum of human experience. Morrison, in particular, becomes a symbol of rebellion that goes beyond mere fashion or lifestyle. He does not preach love and flowers. He speaks of breaking through to the other side, of destroying structures that constrain the human spirit, of confronting the darkness within and without. His performances grow increasingly unpredictable. Some nights he is brilliant, channeling genuine shamanic energy. Other nights he is drunk, belligerent, testing the patience of audiences and bandmates alike. The line between performance and self-destruction blurs. By year's end, the band is simultaneously at the peak of their commercial success and the beginning of their creative unraveling. The album that was recorded in relative anonymity has sold over 1 million copies. The song that almost didn't get radio play has spent 3 weeks at #1. They have appeared on national television, toured the country, become household names. Yet, Morrison speaks openly about his discomfort with fame, his desire to move beyond rock music into cinema and poetry. The other band members face their own reckonings. Manzarek, who first discovered Morrison on a California beach and convinced him to form a band, watches his friend spiral into behaviors that threaten everything they have built. Krieger, whose composition provided their breakthrough, struggles with the irony of being overshadowed by the man who sings his words. Densmore, the rhythmic anchor, tries to maintain professionalism while navigating Morrison's chaos. Record executives, sensing the potential for sustained success, push for more product, more tours, more of whatever made that first album so magnetic. But lightning cannot be bottled, and genius cannot be scheduled. The band enters the studio to record their second album, knowing that expectations are impossibly high, that they are now measured against their own myth. The radio continues to play that song, over and over, a constant presence on the airwaves that defines summer 1967 as surely as any historical event. For 3 minutes, listeners are transported. They hear the organ's hypnotic pulse. They feel the guitar's seductive burn. They surrender to the voice that commands them to submit to transformation. Some dance, some meditate, some make love. Some simply listen, sensing that they are witnessing something rare and fleeting, a moment when art and commerce align, when a song transcends its origins to become a cultural phenomenon. In Venice Beach, where Morrison lived before fame found him, old acquaintances hear his voice on their radios and feel a mixture of pride and sadness. They remember the shy, brilliant UCLA film student who recited poetry on rooftops and spoke of directing movies. They wonder if he is happy, if the fame he claimed not to want has brought him satisfaction. The evidence suggests otherwise. Even in interviews celebrating the band's success, Morrison seems elsewhere, his mind already moving towards something beyond the present moment. The Whisky A Go-Go, where the Doors served as house band just months earlier, becomes a pilgrimage site for fans. Kids line up around the block, hoping to glimpse the magic that first happened on that small stage. The club's owners, recognizing the marketing opportunity, promote the band's origins with increasing embellishment. Every story grows taller in the telling. Every night at the Whisky becomes legendary in retrospect. Across the country, in small towns and major cities, garage bands attempt to replicate the Doors' sound. They buy Vox organs and learn the bass lines on keyboards. They grow their hair long and practice Morrison's vocal inflections. They write songs about fire and desire, about breaking free and breaking down. Some will go on to their own success. Most will fade into obscurity. But all are touched by the sense that something has shifted, that rock music can be more than entertainment, it can be art, ritual, revolution. The song itself becomes a cultural text, analyzed and interpreted from multiple perspectives. Music theorists dissect its modal structure, its flamenco influences, its unconventional length. Poets examine its imagery, its sexual politics, its relationship to literary traditions. Sociologists see it as an expression of generational anxiety and desire. Teenagers simply know that when it plays, something inside them awakens, a hunger for experience, a refusal to accept limitations, a belief that transformation is possible. Morrison's relationship with the song remains complex. In some performances, he delivers it with full commitment, his voice soaring and diving with shamanic intensity. In others, he seems to mock it, dragging out syllables or changing lyrics on a whim. He resents its popularity, even as he recognizes its power. It is both his greatest gift to the world and his heaviest burden. The media, always hungry for narratives, begin to construct the Morrison myth. He is portrayed as the dark prince of rock, the Dionysian figure who lives without limits. Magazine profiles emphasize his good looks, his sexual charisma, his dangerous unpredictability. They quote his poetry and speculate about his demons. They create an image that both reflects and distorts reality. Morrison is all of these things and none of them, a complex human reduced archetype. As autumn deepens into winter, the band's second album takes shape. The pressure to follow up their unprecedented success weighs heavily. They experiment with longer forms, more elaborate arrangements. Morrison pushes for darker themes, exploring territory that makes record executives nervous. The chemistry that produced the first album remains, but it is strained by expectation and exhaustion. The year that gave the world that incendiary song draws to a close. Looking back, it seems almost impossible that 12 months could contain so much transformation. The Doors entered 1967 as unknowns. They exit as one of the most important bands in the world. Their rise has been meteoric, unprecedented, almost frightening in its velocity. But those close to Morrison sense that the story is far from over, that the success of 1967 is merely the first act of a tragedy already in motion. His drinking grows heavier. His weight fluctuates. His behavior becomes more erratic. He speaks of death with increasing frequency, as if rehearsing for an exit he knows is coming. Friends try to intervene, but Morrison deflects their concern with humor or hostility. The song continues to play, oblivious to the struggles of its creators. It exists now in the cultural ether, independent of the men who made it. Teenagers slow dance to it at proms. Soldiers request it on armed forces radio. DJs use it to close out their evening shifts. It becomes, in the truest sense, a standard piece of music that transcends its moment to achieve something approaching immortality. Radio. Programmers, who initially resisted playing the full 7-minute version, begin to reconsider. Some FM stations start featuring the album cut during late-night shows, allowing listeners to experience the song as it was originally intended. The response is overwhelming. People call in to request the longer version. They speak of hearing details they missed in the edited single, of experiencing the song as a journey rather than a snapshot. This presents an interesting paradox. The edited version brought the song to the masses, achieved commercial success, topped the charts. But the full version is the true artistic statement, the complete vision of what the band and producer created in that Sunset Boulevard studio. Both versions coexist, serving different purposes, reaching different audiences. Morrison, when asked about the editing in interviews, gives contradictory responses. Sometimes he dismisses it as a necessary commercial compromise. Other times he expresses frustration that the song's integrity was compromised. Mostly he seems tired of discussing it, eager to move beyond the song that has come to define him in the public imagination. The year 1967 also represents a peak moment for album-oriented rock. The Doors' success, along with the Beatles' Sgt. Peppers and other ambitious works, demonstrates that albums can be more than collections of singles. They can be cohesive artistic statements. This shift will reshape the music industry, giving artists more creative freedom while also raising expectations for what popular music can achieve. Yet within this triumph lie the seeds of future problems. The emphasis on Morrison as frontman and sex symbol creates imbalances within the band. Manzarek, Krieger, and Densmore are equally responsible for the sound, but they receive a fraction of the attention. This dynamic will create tensions that contribute to the band's eventual implosion. The song's success also brings unwanted scrutiny. Morality campaigners begin to pay attention to the Doors' lyrics, particularly those of the hit single. They hear licentiousness where others hear liberation, corruption where others hear honesty. This scrutiny will intensify in the coming years, contributing to the controversies that mark the band's later career. As December arrives and the year draws to its conclusion, the Doors find themselves in a strange position. They have achieved everything a rock band could hope for: commercial success, critical acclaim, cultural impact. Yet Morrison, the voice that carried them to these heights, seems increasingly disengaged from the project. He speaks of wanting to be remembered as a poet, not a rock star. He fantasizes about faking his own death and disappearing. He drinks to escape the pressures of fame, which only creates more pressure. The other band members try to adapt. They discuss contingency plans, ways to continue if Morrison becomes too unreliable. But deep down, they know the truth. Without Morrison's voice, his presence, his dangerous charisma, the Doors would be merely competent, not transcendent. He is both their greatest asset and their fatal flaw. In living rooms across America, families gather around television sets to watch the year's final episodes of their favorite shows. On the radio, that song plays one more time, a keyboard introduction that sounds like liquid sunlight, the guitar that smolders and burns, the voice that commands and seduces. For 3 minutes, the listeners are transported. They do not think about Vietnam or race riots or the generation gap. They simply surrender to the music, to the fire, to the transformation promised in every note. The year that began with 4 unknown musicians in a recording studio ends with their faces on magazine covers, their music on every radio station, their impact on culture undeniable. They have set America's radios ablaze, and in doing so, they have helped ignite a cultural revolution that will continue to burn long after the embers of 1967 have cooled. Morrison stands on a hotel balcony somewhere, looking out at a city whose name he cannot remember. Below, cars stream past, each carrying people living their own dramas, pursuing their own dreams. From an open window, he hears his own voice drifting out that song again. Always that song. He lights a cigarette and considers the strange machinery of fame. How a single piece of music can reshape a life. How words and melody can become a kind of prison disguised as liberation. The future remains unwritten, but the past is already crystallizing into legend. 1967 will be remembered as the year the Doors arrived, the year their fire spread across the nation, the year rock music expanded its possibilities and proved that art and commerce need not be enemies. It will be remembered as a year of transformation, when old certainties crumbled and new possibilities emerged. But for Morrison, standing alone on that balcony, the year represents something more personal and more painful. It is the year he became a symbol, an icon, a myth. The year he lost control of his own narrative. The year the door he opened proved impossible to close. He flicks the cigarette into the darkness and watches it arc downward, a tiny meteor falling toward Earth, its light extinguished before it lands. Inside the hotel room, the radio plays on. The song ends. Another begins. The year turns toward its conclusion, and somewhere, in the invisible machinery of culture and commerce, the gears are already turning, preparing for what comes next: the triumphs and disasters, the creative peaks and personal valleys, the slow burn that will consume everything before it finally, inevitably, goes dark. But that is a story for another time. For now, in the final days of 1967, the Doors stand at the summit, having climbed higher and faster than anyone imagined possible. The fire they lit continues to burn. The radios continue to blaze. And across America, millions of listeners, known and unknown, continue to hear that voice calling them toward something they cannot name, but desperately need a break on through, a chance to transform, a moment of transcendence in an increasingly chaotic world. The year ends. The music plays on. The legend is just beginning. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any incredible story we've prepared for you. See you in the next story.